Okay, today I'm pleased to be joined by Paul Mason, who has recently taken over the Lockkeeper's Rest Micropub, which is set in a beautiful 18th century former lock house in Sawley in Derbyshire. Welcome, Paul, and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, good morning, Neil. Good to be here.
Thank you. Paul's kindly agreed to share his story with me and tell me a little bit about really his personal journey that him and his wife have experienced in getting to where they are now. Paul, could you tell me a little bit more about where the idea came from and what inspired you?
Well, I'd recently retired a couple of years ago, and I was enjoying life on the golf course. But we'd often had a bit of a thought about running a B&B or a coffee shop or something like that. And we live in the local area where this particular pub is. And we've walked past it for many years. I've sort of maybe over the last 30 years that we've been married. And we've enjoyed watching the place being transformed from an old rundown lock house into a residential property. And a little coffee shop opened about 6 or 7 years ago at one end of the property, which we always thought was a great addition to the local area. And then in the last probably 4 years ago, Dave, the previous lock keeper and the owner of the property with his partner, Catherine, they decided he was going to build a micropub, which you can see bits of it behind me now. And he constructed it. He's basically built all the furniture, all the setup, and put it together himself. And we frequented it from the opening night. I think it was the back end of 17, early 18. And we've always enjoyed being in the place. And then fortuitously, I think it was last October time, we got wind of it coming up for sale. And whilst probably our immediate interests weren't about running a pub or running a coffee shop directly, we thought it'd be a great opportunity for myself and my wife to maybe ease out of full-time work for my wife, who's a full-time nurse, and to get a better work-life balance. So we liked the pub, we liked the area, we liked the idea of running the coffee shop. So we decided we're going to take a plunge into our resources and purchase the property. So we've completed that as of March this year. So we are now the proud owners of the Sawley Lock House, which is situated with a canal literally 5 yards that way and the river 10 yards that way behind me. So we're in a little triangle between the Sawley Cut and the River Trent. So that was the sort of inspiration for us having a bit of a change of direction, but more about work-life balance and having 3 or 4 days a week for ourselves. And then we can have, the both of us off from main work and go and do what we want to do Monday to Thursday-ish.
That sounds amazing. So it's living the dream, really. It's I think a lot of people talk about work-life balance and leaving the rat race and doing something different, which is exactly, by the sounds of it, exactly what's happened to you. And did you have any prior experience at all of running any sort of licensed premises, or are you just literally going in feet first? And
we've got zero experience in the real world. Having said that, a very good friend of ours, Marie Redfern, she's put together a local micropub called the Sawley Junction, and we, played a small part in getting her up and running, doing a bit of painting and decorating, and we helped behind the bar for the first few weeks while she got started. And then she settled into a really good business, and she's always been very encouraging to us to you could do that. Go on, why don't you have a go at the lock house? And when it came up, we took that bit of a push and a bit of go for it sort of approach from Marie, and we're thoroughly happy to have the establishment, and we're looking forward to Boris relaxing a few rules so we can actually get started with the place.
Absolutely, yeah. So have you been able to lean on Marie for advice now, or do you feel you've got all the knowledge you need? Or
absolutely, I think she'll be looking to get a retainer at some point, but but no, she knows a lot about the business. She's brewed her own beers, and she's very knowledgeable in the whole process. So we've used her as a bit of a stalking horse to try and get some ideas and thoughts about what we could do here. And we look forward to her coming down for her first pint, and that'll be a nice return of favour for all the good work she's done for us with the Sawley Junction.
So would you say, has everything gone fairly smoothly since you bought the premises? Have you faced any sort of challenges? Could you take us through those at all?
Oh yeah, lots. um, I guess the interesting part was initially buying the property. It's a very, it's an old building. It's a 1793 building, 18th century property. It sits, as I said earlier, right between the river and the canal, and it's in the middle of the CRT's land, the Canal and River Trust land. So they own everything outside of our property boundary. To access the property, we have to get down a dirt track, which is locked and gated through the CRT and the local fishing club. And so access and the information you need to put together to buy it's almost a listed building, but it's not quite. So purchasing it wasn't straightforward like buying a residential property. So there's lots of things and side letters and covenants and associated things that you can and cannot do with the property. So that took a little bit longer than probably we would have expected to actually just get the basic purchase. So that was like phase one. The next challenge was probably actually getting a bank account.
Really?
You wouldn't think. So we decided to set up as a limited company. And with the current climate and COVID and people, let's say, jumping on the bandwagon to get their payments for furloughing and bounce back loans, all the banks are absolutely inundated with backlogs of people trying to open businesses and business accounts. So we've been through, I think we applied to 5 different banks, and eventually one of them has finally said, we'll support you in opening the business and getting going. So fair play to Lloyds, who came good as of Thursday last week, just a couple of days before we opened on the Saturday for the coffee shop. So that was a torturous part to get us going, because we couldn't buy, couldn't trade, we couldn't do anything. So as a limited company we'd set up in early March, we were then hands tied to keep out of our personal affairs and try to get it into our business affairs. So that was that. I guess this is where you come in, because the next part was about insurance. And I initially tried the normal, insuring a property, but because of the location, there were very few people willing to just do anything without a ridiculous amount of things to go through. And I saw your website, saw Micropub Insure. It just looked like the thing that might suit us, and be very supportive. And so far, I can't fault the involvement from your guys in terms of, getting us going, starting us up, setting us up. I think Liam initially made contact with me, or I made contact with him, and he phoned me back. We had a talk about it, and I like the sort of personal approach that you guys have got, and it made it a little bit more easy for us to decide that we would go with you guys and get ourselves started. So that was a big thing for us to get over the hurdle of.
Well, that's great to hear. Thanks very much for that feedback. That's
yeah, really just to get us going. That was really good for us. And I guess probably the last challenges, other than swerving around COVID, is just acquiring the license. I've never done it before, so going through all that, we're not in a position where we can go and sit down and do the exam like normally to get your personal license. So it was an online thing with a Zoom meeting with a blank screen and answering all the questions. As soon as we passed, okay, so it wasn't a big thing, but it was quite different doing an online invigilated exam, question, multi-choice, but it went okay. And then from that, there's the difficulties that whilst we live in Derbyshire, it's Sawley, where the Sawley Lockhouse, you think it is, it's got a Nottingham postcode, but it's actually in Leicestershire. So we're right on the triangle between the 3 places. So getting things delivered to the right place at the right time with the access is quite difficult to fully explain exactly where we are. So we're right on the triangle of Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire and Leicestershire. So it can be a little bit of a challenge to some people finding the place. But other than that, I think the rest of it's going pretty well. We've done a bit of minor preparation and decoration. I don't think we're going to change the pub style too much, because it is very rustic and very much in the style of the local boating community. And there's the Sawley Marina, one of the biggest inland marinas, is literally a quarter of a mile that way back up the canal. And we get a lot of interest and people coming to watch the boats come past the lock and hopefully sitting outside and having a beer before very long.
I think that's part of the Micropub feel in general, is quite fairly minimalist, quite rustic. I think people like that feel. That's the sort of feedback we get. We've got quite a few. We're down in Worthing, and we've got 5 micropubs now just in the Worthing area. They're all very similar, small premises in suburbs, not in the town centre. And yeah, they're very sort of cosy and welcoming without being sort of OTT. So is there anything you're going to particularly change, perhaps compared to how it was run before? Have you got your own ideas and take on it?
I think that there's not a massive amount we can actually do with the physical size of the place. We're restricted to the fact that it's a residential property that just happens to have a couple of businesses stuck on it. The place behind me, the actual place, is very small. It has, I think, 13 actual seats. So it is compact and bijou. The tables are at standing height so that people can stand with those who are sitting. So you can probably get double that, maybe 30 at a push inside. But we have got a nice area outside. And I guess a couple of 3 changes we're going to do are, we're going to have to, in the immediate term, when there's a chance to open on the 12th of April, it's not viable for us to do all the casks and open it and find that it can only sit outside, it's pouring with rain, and we've cracked a couple of barrels open and can't shift them. So we're probably going to put a bit of a bottled and canned service on to be able to sit outside and have a drink in the immediate terms until we get to maybe full opening. And the other part was that the cafe is at the other end of the building, was always separated from the pub in terms of how the clientele interacted. So we're going to merge that a little bit and fuzz the lines between the 2 bits of the business. So if you want to have a coffee with a beer down the other end, you can do that. If you want to have a coffee or a beer at this end, you can do that. So we will do that while there's outside only. And I guess the only other couple of things, and I may be causing trouble with those fine beer connoisseurs, but we're actually going to get a lager on, so don't tell too many, but we're going to get something done.
I can always edit the videos.
Yeah, we can edit that bit, but we will probably put a lager of some sort, just the one specialist one. Yet to discuss that with any of the breweries, but we're probably going to put a lager on, because there's so many people we've sat in and asked, have you got a lager? And whilst we are going to preserve the cask ale traditions, I think it's nice to have an option. And then
Absolutely.
The other thing,
I think, you're not alone there in that a lot of pubs are putting a few gins on, a couple of wines, and just giving that little bit of variety while still specialising in the.
We're going to do that. We've got the cask is going to be the prime bit. It's always had wines and ciders, but it's not done the gins. So, like you said, we're going to throw a few gins in as the only spirits we're going to do as a little side thing, because it's the in thing, and we think it's right to offer that to the customers.
Absolutely. And with your beer, I presume, or am I presuming right, that most of it will be sourced as local as possible from the local microbreweries and whatnot?
I think that's the way I'd like to operate. I think the philosophy, maybe born from a bit of guidance from Marie, is maybe we're going to patronise those smaller places. There are a couple slightly bigger scale, but all the local breweries that we want to talk to, I've made a list of. I intend to get around them now. I've got the premises license transfer is the other little bit that's just waiting to come through. So having got the personal license, I can now start to talk to the breweries in some seriousness to think about when and how we want to get something delivered. And obviously, once the restrictions are lifted, we want to be able to trade straight away. So I think that's probably the next bit of our thinking through is how we do that. Which breweries, there's access to drop things off, as I mentioned earlier, is the difficult bit. So we couldn't really afford to have somebody turn up. We weren't at the property, for example, and the gate's a quarter of a mile away. So you can't drop the beer and leave it outside in the sun before you get it back racked up. So typically Dave, the previous lot keeper, has gone out to the brewers and picked it up himself, just so he can get it straight back and get it on the rack. So that's probably what I'm going to have to do. So I want to have maybe an hour and a half round trip, dropping at the breweries, picking up what I need to do each week, and trying to rotate through maybe half a dozen breweries and see if we can get some stability and ease of actually acquiring the beers.
I think just finally, have you got any advice that you could give to anybody thinking about starting a micropub? Any sort of do's and don'ts, tips, that kind of thing?
I won't say don't do it yet, because we haven't got into it yet. But I guess the just look around carefully. There's lots of things about how you want to trade. Obviously, we're in a contactless world. We've got very thick walls, and Wi-Fi type systems for card readers are a little bit clunky at times. So there's a few practical things more than the worry of the pub. I think there's a good demand for micropubs. I think they're a good investment if you want to, not work flat out. For us, it's, I said at the start, the work-life balance fits us nicely, that we can maybe get the beers in on Monday, rack them all up, get them vented Thursday for tapping Friday, and then work the weekend to shift the beer. So the bit in between gives us that work-life balance. So I guess we were very apprehensive. We've never run a business. We've never run a pub. We've never done anything like that. And coming out of what would have been full-time corporate work for myself for 38 years and dropping into something completely alien to us, we've got the apprehensions, but we've seen Marie flourish from zero to somewhere. So I'm taking a bit of that guidance that you can do it if you put your mind to it. It's not too difficult. Keep on top of your let's say your incomings and your outgoings and your stock and rotations of products and things. And I think most people, if you just put their mind to it, will find that it's very rewarding. We had our first day with the coffee shop last weekend, and we were, let's say, pleasantly surprised. I think there was for the first time opening in nearly a year, it got a bit of extra interest, but the actual work and me and my wife Katie working together went really well. So we're going to translate that into the pub side of things once we're open, and hopefully it'll work out for us. But we, having looked at the trepidation to start with, we've got no qualms with where we've got to now. So I would encourage people, go for it. If you've never had a go, you'll never know whether you were going to be successful. So that's
absolutely, don't know until you try it.
Yeah,
that's great. That's some great advice there. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And really, just to say, I wish you every success with your new ventures. I'm sure they will be a roaring success. Lockdown finishing now, fingers crossed, everything will go in the right direction for you. Thank you once again for joining me today and spending your time.
No, it's been a pleasure, and it's nice to meet you, if not in person, but certainly face-to-face-ish over the airwaves. But no, it's been good, and thank you very much for your support to get us started. That's great.